vuelta. Gracias por estar ahí con un panel súper interesante y con súper expertos y mi gran amiga María Juliana.
Okay, we're back with this new panel. The panel is National and Regional Connectivity and the impact on its impact in or on the Internet services affordability. The impact is national and regional connectivity, the impact on the post-COVID-19 service connectivity. After the 2 years of the pandemic and the isolation and the quarantine, we are going to give the floor to Maria Juliana, that is located in Bogota. Good morning. Good afternoon to everybody in Buenos Aires, my colleagues in the panel, also greetings to you. I know that you've been involved in the 7-week course, so I'm sure that you had a very enriching experience. It was a new experience for us. I will allow you to introduce the new panels. Some of the panelists are new to me, or some of them, I've known them for years. Maria Juliana, let's welcome the panelists then. And at the end, I'm going to read the Q&A with the questions where we have the questions in English or in Spanish, okay? Great, Olga. As Olga was saying, we're starting with the National and Regional Connectivity Panel and its impact on Internet service affordability. Over the last days, we spoke of digital services, connectivity, and the risk, or the risks. As we're connected, we haven't had the chance at the national level or at the subnational level and to see that the origin or the result of this is to have access to the internet. It's not a matter of access or having access and access to connectivity, but accessibility. And we see that there's digital divide that is pretty significant. So we have a very important panel. For today, we have Nicolás Silva, the Commissioner of CRC from Colombia. It's a great pleasure to see you once again, Nicolás. We'll hear from Gustavo López, Vice President of Enacom, Argentina. Also, Iván Sánchez, Director General of UNICEF Colombia. Lester Benito Garcia, Director of Connectivity and Access Policy in Facebook. And as you can see, we have the chance to speak of connectivity and to see it from different points of view, from the point of view of the regulator, the operator, and from a service provider, an ISP, okay? So hopefully we can take all questions that the audience may have on the way we find connectivity and social digital device after the pandemic, and how we are approaching this with the regulatory agencies, what are the plans. And let me remind you that we are going to have a Q&A session after the speeches. And right now, over to Nicolás Silva. Nicolás, how are you? Great, Juliana. Regards to you. Special thanks to Olga. I'm grateful for having been invited to this important panel. Also thanks to my colleagues Lester, Gustavo, and Iván. And I'll be at your disposal to share my experience. Okay, great. What are your plans in the CRC, and what is the vision of CRC in connection with connectivity, and if there has been an impact on the regulatory agency of the CRC in Colombia? Thank you. Indeed, from the point of view of the regulator, now this process and everything that we have gone through during the last months in the pandemic has taken us to face many challenges that have not been minor, but to guarantee connectivity so all stakeholders and users, Colombian users especially, could perform their business activities in a timely manner. It's not a minor thing, as we have seen. We were able to measure traffic constantly. There's been an exponential growth of traffic during the pandemic. As regulators, we were forced to to suspend some of the events or the activities that we have in our regulatory agency and to make the necessary changes to serve these needs that were brought about by the pandemic. The important thing is to have a legal framework that would allow to adopt some of the necessary measures in Colombia that, in essence, let us to have services, postal service, telecommunication, and internet services to be declared as essential services. In this way, we ensure that we could provide these services, and so that carriers and operators could continue or could provide business continuity and connectivity. We adopted many measures. I would highlight some of them, but for example, starting the contacts with the health services and the social organizations. So we facilitated the asterisk 192 number. It was a toll-free number to conduct a very important experiment for these health services. And also we massified the use of digital channels for customer service of these services that I just mentioned. It's not that it's a new thing, but we found that it was new for us, and it provided users to adapt platforms so they could interact in a new way with the first responders, for example. And these new measures, basically with the new digital channels, have been very positive and evolved the services provided by carriers, companies, and utility companies. Just to mention a few, in line with the regulations or with the laws that we have, we suspended the compliance of quality indicators so that carriers could focus primarily on providing the service or the internet service with an incremental demand that was very significant and not necessarily on the quality of service or improving the quality of service. It's not detrimental to the quality of service, but given the need, we focus primarily on guaranteeing these services. Okay? In general terms, this gave us the chance to provide it or responded to the services that came from the health service, education, and it was not a minor thing, because what we have seen or what we have experienced in Latin America, that there was an exponential growth. Because of the COVID-19, we had an increase of 30%, even 50%. In the Colombia, we ranged from in March, probably 38% of traffic increase. And even if it's been incremental, the demand has posed quite a challenge for Colombia. And I would like to acknowledge the carriers and also the stakeholders in the supply chain that were able to provide continuity in the services and guaranteeing the same services and utilities for our citizens and for companies. That's why I would like to acknowledge this. And, we perform a follow-up along 1 year and a half. And we have seen that there's been an important development in sites where we concentrate most of the content, the most consulted content, most of the traffic, like 55% of the traffic lies in ISPs or local hosting companies. That is, the CLs in Colombia concentrate more than half of the traffic of the country, and it's a clear demonstration of the significance and the relevance, and I'm sure that we're going to have more in the future with this sort of infrastructure that is going to be essential not only for hosting content but also for the provision of telecommunication services. Now, in line with this, apart from the changes that we made in the agenda and the priorities placed upon providing internet services, in Colombia we see that this is a future trend that requires strengthening not only what we've been doing so far, but also the future agenda for the country. So it is apparent to have that the telecommunication services role is paramount because we play a key role to support education, production, and the functioning or the operation of the country. And that's why the regulator needs to be aware of this and needs to respond to the needs of these industries, and especially protecting and pursuing this work to care for the users so they can have continuity in the operations and in the way they do business. We primarily focus on 6 pillars. One is competition promotion, protection of users and audiences in convergence, the quality of services as well. And another pillar that is very important and valid for regulation, that is innovation. Just to mention a few, apart from the 46 pillars that we have developed, one of the exercises that we consider key to make progress in this process and to become a 5G regulator, well, is where we focus to have innovation in our processes. For example, to digitalize the protection system and to have sandboxes or testing environments that we are deploying right now, so that new developments of new services have the necessary space, and this would constitute a limit so these new services could be driven and could be developed in the country effectively. Also, data use, not from the perspective of the private sector, but also from the public sector, from the regulator's view, okay? Also, in line with the competition, we've been developing new activities on IT pluralism, developing new content, and protecting users' data and protecting audiences. So in summary, there are many things that we have attained. To begin with, I mentioned the user data protection. We wanted to find a way to protect companies and users subject to the regulation of CRC, that this could be done more effectively, more simple, more agile for everybody, for all the stakeholders, whether they are corporations or users. So in line with that, we have reviewed and we have streamlined the reports. We have incorporated quite a few, so that this data could be tapped and could be useful not only for the regulatory agencies, but also for those that are in need of those data, whether it is the academic world or the industries that may require to use this data. In line with what we have foreseen so far, complying with the goals that we have set forth in September 30, we have complied with 78% of these goals, and we are still pursuing a regulatory framework seeking the facilitation of everything that is in line with economic recovery, which includes procedures related to infrastructure, equipment, and connectivity, and other additional elements such as human capital, applications, among others. So, in line with creating a favorable innovation market, this is the sort of efforts that we pursue in our regulatory agency. Now, in line with the most salient features, we should mention the passing of Law 2821. And there's a key aspect in this law that public utility services and the internet access is characterized as essential. So these measures or this characterization that dates back to many years ago and before the pandemic is not timely but is permanent. So it creates many challenges in public policy making, in regulations, and that is why we're analyzing what would be the differential measures that we should pass in legislation so that ISPs, or internet service providers, could have favorable conditions in the market when it comes to access to remote rural areas. And that is a challenge that we have analyzed and we've been working on. It's going to take some time, but next year we're going to pass some of these laws and we're going to continue making progress in this endeavor. So, to summarize, we're going to pursue the development of our agenda. We see that many of the stakeholders in the supply chain have taken on these challenges that is brought by the COVID-19 pandemic and anything that is related to economic recovery in our sector. And that's why we're working along these lines.
Thank you very much, Nicolás. As a Colombian, I'm very excited to listen to you talk about these subjects and particularly how the way that we're developing to meet citizens' needs. And it's great to hear that you all will be safeguarding the services provided to citizens. Thank you. I will now ask Gustavo López, the Vice President of the Argentine National Communications Entity, to tell us about their experience in Argentina, how regulators can help to reduce the digital divide and see what policies can be driven to reactivate the economy post-pandemic. Hi, Gustavo. Good afternoon. Greetings to Adrian and to all of my colleagues on this panel. Nicolás, thank you for inviting me to take part. So basically, something similar to what Nicolás explained happened in Argentina. The sensation is that the pandemic has accelerated certain needs and basically it speeded up the times. And what we did was declare internet to be an essential public service. The Congress passed a law saying that telecommunications were an essential public service. This allows us to offer basic universal service to benefit the most vulnerable sectors and those hardest hit by the pandemic, so no one be left out. What we are seeking when we say these telecoms are essential public services, including internet, is to universalize the service, for the state to have the legal tools allowing it to guarantee universal access independently of people's economic situation. So it's been shown that internet makes our lives much easier on a daily basis. As you know, yesterday, billions of people suffered from the difficulty, the impossibility of being able to communicate as we have been doing because the big servers collapsed and prevented us from being able to communicate on 4 major social network platforms, basically hitting half the planet. So internet is definitely here to stay in everybody's daily lives. With the pandemic, from doctors issuing prescriptions online, getting appointments to be vaccinated against COVID, everything happened through telecommunications. 2.5 million Argentines were left working from home. The education at all levels was online last year. This year, university education continues to be online. So internet as a tool was declared of a first necessity because you can't change legislation and make people work and study from home and then not provide them with the right services because they have economic issues. So we took a series of measures, and the first one was to declare these a public essential service. But I'd like to show you a few maps which show the degree to which we have achieved connectivity and penetration in our country. So if we could start with access to internet, and I'm going to, no, it's, well, if we start with this one, what I'd like to tell you is about what measures we've taken. In Argentina, we have a fiduciary fund, which is supported by companies and can only be used to extend networks. And as from the pandemic, we created 10 programs. And what we are doing is to develop a policy to extend networks to those areas where they weren't getting there. Next slide. You probably can't see it very well because the writing is very small, but there are lots of different programs and the investments are given from the Enacom, which is the Argentine National Communications Entity. You can see pesos, over 7 billion pesos until last week. These are over the 18 months of the pandemic. It's about $72 million. These are public funds which we give to the loan entities so that they can support this. Now, the important thing is to see what programs have been benefiting. For instance, there's a program for localities with less than 30,000 inhabitants. Over $3 million went to extend networks to small localities with less than 30,000 inhabitants. Then we distributed tablets and telephone cards and laptops for people who were otherwise unable to access technological tools. We also use this fund to transfer money.
Red de fibra óptica de 35.000 kilómetros a través de una empresa pública, más allá de todas las redes privadas que existen. Le transferimos unos 30 millones de dólares, 3.000 millones de pesos, para aumentar la capacidad en 10 veces la capacidad existente. Desarrollamos un programa en barrios populares, es decir, en villas de emergencia, a lo cual le hemos destinado hasta ahora algo más de 6 millones de dólares, 610 millones de pesos, y por primera vez le damos subsidios a las propias cooperativas proveedoras de servicios en cada uno de esos barrios, para que extiendan la red y lleven conectividad a los barrios populares a través de fibra óptica. Tuvimos otros programas de conectividad en zonas de difícil acceso, como el Delta del Paraná o la Puna, y en instituciones públicas, para llegar a escuelas, para llegar a hospitales y para zonas de seguridad. Voy a pedir la próxima placa. Es simplemente la demostración de que esta inversión se hizo a lo largo y a lo ancho del país, 2,5 millones prácticamente de kilómetros cuadrados. En la próxima placa tenemos la misma inversión por zona, son las dos placas siguientes, las voy a pasar rápido porque no se ven, son las 4 placas siguientes. Y vamos a ir a esta especie de resumen. Esto es lo que se le pasó al sector privado, público y social, 4.136 millones para millones a la empresa pública estatal para el mejoramiento de la red federal de fibra óptica. Y la última placa que voy a mostrar es la cantidad de localidades beneficiadas con esta política que terminan siendo en los distintos programas, si pasamos a la próxima placa, por favor, terminan siendo 507 localidades.
These are 507 locations. So you can see this from quite a long way, but there's some 500 locations which received new connectivity options. We also saw an increase in traffic during the pandemic. Traffic increased by 40%. And in fact, the first studies we did, the first work we did between the Enacom and the service providers, the first thing we had to do was make sure that the system didn't collapse and could take this 40% increase in traffic. Now, the next PowerPoint presentation shows us access to fixed wireless internet, which is what I want to talk about. Since the pandemic was declared, in 2019, we had over 8 million homes with fixed connection to internet. That was 61%. Next slide, please. I think we've skipped one. Can we look at the previous one, please? We had over 8 million homes connected to internet. We went up to over 9.5 million in 2020, and we're pushing 10 million this year. These are all homes which joined the system, and it represents nearly 68% of the total. So now this slide shows us the kind of connection that people have. What we are seeing in a darker blue is cable, modem by cable. The yellow is fiber optics, 56% of cable modem, 22% of ADSL connections, and 15%. It's a little bit higher now. It's gone up to 17% of fiber optics. With the work that we are developing, we are hoping that the increase in activity is something that we can achieve through fiber optics. Now, if we go back to the previous slide, we can't see this, but what is in the darker blue, which is where there is a greater penetration, and the lighter blue is where there is less penetration. So although Argentina has almost 68% internet penetration in homes, in the city of Buenos Aires, it's much higher than 70%. We have more connection, in fact, than homes. But in certain regions of our country, as you can see in the north, it's barely 32%. The grey provinces, it's not even 40%. And those that are light blue, between 30 or 40%. So most of these plans, which I described, to foster greater activity, have to do with investment in those places where the private sector doesn't reach. We've developed a two-pronged policy. One has got to do with strengthening public services, and the other is a strong public-private investment to reach those areas where we weren't reaching before. Thank you very much. Thank you. One of the things that I find striking about your presentation is that internet is directly related to people's rights, to human rights such as access to education, to health and to work. And the pandemic and this extraordinary work that you have been talking about have meant that these rights have not been violated in Argentina. And I think it's definitely a before and after moment in the history of telecommunications in Latin America. Iván Sánchez, the Director General of Ufinet in Colombia, who's going to give us the carriers' perspective, the service providers. And he's going to talk to us about the challenges and the difficulties you tackled during the pandemic and the exponential increase in traffic and how they managed to overcome this and how they are contributing to development in the region. Welcome, and over to you. Thank you very much, Maria Juliana. I'd like to greet my friends on the panel, Adriana and Olga. Thank you very much for the invitation. I was reflecting that it's been 10 years that I've been speaking at the SSIG, so thank you very much. Well, from the point of view of our presence in the market as a carrier, it's clear that the pandemic and the post-pandemic period are throwing up an awful lot of challenges that we have to tackle. However, luckily for us, these have also given us fresh perspectives on growth and internet penetration, particularly in the more remote areas. We are a carrier who works in the telecoms wholesale area, which means that our clients are telecoms carriers. And we provide access to internet channels or national transport networks. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, during this time, we have identified changes in traffic behavior in terms of the quantity of traffic and in the terms of content and in the hubs to which our clients are getting. Now, in terms of quantity, the first impact when the pandemic started was that there was a generalized fear and there was a sudden drop in internet connectivity, mainly among small and medium-sized companies, and also from the educational sector, because when the lockdown happened, obviously, offices were abandoned, schools were closed, so were banks. Everything produced a sharp drop in traffic, which only recovered slowly as new demands for residential connectivity emerged. As everybody was at home, there was a sharp increase in the demand for connectivity, and this meant that we were able to identify huge growth in traffic. I can say that in 2020, our internet sales goal objectives doubled because of the growth demanded by the carriers. This doesn't only cover the traffic managed by the carriers, but also lots of small carriers emerged. In terms of national statistics, they were offering services where bigger operators and carriers weren't getting. They're very small carriers. They're like kind of community TV carriers that decided to offer internet access so that more users could access services. Based on these smaller carriers, we have seen a massive growth in traffic. In fact, during 2020 and what goes of this year, every month we make adjustments to the network to increase transport capacity and maintain the quality of the service that we provide. This is quite a significant challenge because we're really talking about the post-pandemic, when we've seen a major impact on the supply of materials, of devices, and we see going transport is lagging behind. So it's quite difficult to keep everything up to date because we simply don't have the devices, the equipment, the tools, the replacement parts. They just don't arrive when you need them. But we are making an effort to keep traffic in the best possible conditions. Then, as well as an increase in traffic, Nicolás mentioned something, which is the change in browsing behavior, like the content which people are accessing. Nicolás was saying that 55%, I think that's what he said, of the traffic was local. This is for two reasons. The first is because they're locally hosted content on which we were working all of last year and most of this year when it comes to updating the pinging with the service providers. And what's happened is that they've increased local storage capabilities to be able to distribute content over larger sections of the country, improving latency and giving access to international channels. The support has been provided by the content providers. And the other point is that there's been a greater access to pure local traffic and content. Before the pandemic, there was lots of traffic which simply wasn't happening, like visits to the doctor, doctor's appointments, all of the government red tape and procedures, all of this started being done online. Entrepreneur programs, entrepreneurs who were launching new products or new businesses on internet. So this meant that the access to local content increased hugely. And this is why we are seeing a change in traffic behavior as access to information is mostly local. And I also think that this made it easier for us so that the international partners, so our international standards could respect quality standards. I think it would have been far harder if those channels had been filled up so quickly. I think in 2021, we are still seeing fairly major growth in terms of sales and traffic, internet traffic. And this has meant making a big change in the technology that we manage so we can support the growth envisaged. Although this behavior, there are many aspects about this behavior which are worth remarking, particularly the appearance of smaller carriers in more remote areas, because it's allowing people who live in very far-flung areas have access to internet services with excellent quality, because these small carriers are developing fiber optic networks which reach those areas. And that's very significant. And I think it's really good in terms of ensuring the average quality standards of our services provided in Colombia. Right, Iván, thank you very much. When you don't have a strictly technical profile, as you guys do, it's so interesting to hear these speeches. It's very interesting to hear that there was a drop in traffic at the outset of the pandemic. And I would like to highlight that connectivity in itself will be a driver for economic reactivation. So I think it's a very promising outlook because virtual and physical relationships will reactivate in a different way thanks to this greater connectivity as a factor of economic reactivation. Our next panelist is Lester Benito Garcia. He's the Director of Connectivity and Access Policy for Facebook. He's our last panelist. We'll have an all-round vision of connectivity and internet services. And what better than to see it from the point of view of Facebook, a company that provides services to 4 billion people and which we have in our pockets every day. Lester, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Maria Juliana. Thank you for moderating this panel, and I would like to thank Olga. This is my second edition, the second time I participate in this House School of Internet Governance. And I would like to thank also the rest of the panelists that have said things that are very, very interesting, that make my speech more interesting and more effective by using more appropriately the time. Sometimes we have to read in between lines, and I would like to underscore that with the issue of the pandemic, effectively, we had an increase of traffic that was exponential, that between 30 to 55%. In our region, I believe that was 30 something, and it's been the same levels at the global level. However, that increase in traffic, at first, it was a wake-up call for the capacity to provide services, or if the networks could support that traffic. I'm not an IT engineer, obviously, and those that they size traffic networks for peak hours, for the highest peaks, it's difficult, and this was unexpected because people were studying and working at from the same location, and also requesting products and services over the internet and over social media or home delivery. So networks. The important thing is that networks were resilient. They supported the 33 or 30-something% increase with the support of the authorities or some of the entities I take part in many committees in Colombia, in Argentina and Mexico follow suit and discuss the same thing in order to optimize traffic. Facebook and other companies in the industry made the necessary adjustments in the video transfer bits, so we could place priority upon more relevant traffic like emergencies, communication, healthcare assistance, and all of that. And right now, we are in a post-COVID-19 recovery situation, and probably we can resume in-person events pretty soon. There are many things that are here to stay because they evolve very, very fast, and they're not going to change. And some of them emerged, and I don't think that they're going to change. And we all agree that there's going to be increase in traffic, demanding more services and infrastructure. We know how this way of working changed globally. There's going to be increasingly more remote jobs, online shopping. The only thing that we can expect is a traffic increase in the future. And what we've been doing with companies and with regulatory agencies is exactly the same. Promoting connectivity infrastructure, driving things that could promote foreign direct investment or decision making that could indeed increase that connectivity. I would like to touch upon briefly some topics here. And there's a very important indicator that I would like to pay attention to, especially to the students that are attending. Please pay attention to the Social Inclusion Index of Internet. It's a measurement that we have been doing with Facebook and The Economist, and it's an index. It's the Internet Social Inclusion Index. I believe that this is that provides a lot of information, and we can basically develop public policy in line with this index. This index is based on relevance, accessibility, preparation, and availability. These are the 4 pillars that measure demand, supply, and we are coming up with a number to see how far are we from the optimum connectivity in line with these 4 pillars, like network availability, they're affordable, accessibility, relevant content, and the regulatory conditions and techniques to provide this service effectively. Now, the conclusion of this Internet Index leads us to the paradox of connectivity. And I'll urge you to read further these publications and this tool, because there are many things that are still pending. For example, progress or large strides in terms of connectivity and content development. However, there are countries, especially in our region, that still have a digital divide or a gap. Paradoxically, societies or countries where the communities that require more access are the ones that are left behind. Not only the use of the internet that was required during the pandemic, but those societies are excluded because of education, utility services, health. So what is it that we need so that this availability improves, so these sectors that are left behind can be finally or eventually included? So some of the topics widely discussed by the panelists are important for the regulator. For example, Iván was telling me what happened with what they've done with regulators, and in the case of Facebook, they are playing a key role and is a fundamental part. For example, transportation or transport networks or backbone networks, so we could take that service to the end users' devices. For example, Facebook takes part in infrastructure in the region. Lastly, for example, this was commented and widely discussed there about to invest in a submarine cable from Brazil to Europe is going to double the amount of traffic for the southern cone of our region, okay? And at the same time, these infrastructure initiatives, we have specific connectivity projects. For example, the companies that are widely, or the countries that are widely represented here nowadays have the case of post-rural initiatives with satellite projects and ISPs together in Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina, also Brazil, Chile, Guatemala, and probably I'm missing country. So we have 4,000 hotspots in the rural sector that they have coverage to serve 500 people. So it's a way of offering that to the rural sector, SMEs, local merchants. That is a way of having affordable internet access through a carrier or an operator, and through the way we help with implementation. And also we have Internet for All, that is an initiative conducted in Peru with a rural mobile wholesale operator together with Telefonica Peru, and CAF and the IDB were funding this project. Why are we promoting these sort of projects in these sort of environments? Well, it's something that my panelists and my colleagues explain very well, and let me summarize it with these ideas. If we have public policy in line to support these sort of initiatives, not only Facebook, not only the carriers, but also the governments, if they can contribute to help with these initiatives, it will be possible to have more projects of this kind. And we see the emergence of a very flexible regulatory system where we will have a license or a concession of the rural mobile carrier, and it would be an instrument of public policy devised especially for providing internet in rural areas. The sandbox, the regulatory sandbox in Colombia, is another clear example of regulation that is flexible. We also discussed the openness and the interest with this connectivity vision and flexibility, that we could converge in new pathways to conduct investment projects of this kind. Now, in this regard, we're paving the way or setting the course for having important endeavors. If you want to deep dive into these sort of projects, you can consult the Internet Social Inclusion Index. One of the most important conclusions of this index is the fact that this society that required access are being left behind, and the specific indicators that are 56 of the Social Inclusion Index provide us with the public policy elements and what would be the requirements to implement this in every single country to have the necessary incentives for making these investments. And also I would like to reflect upon what happened in the pandemic a year and a half ago and what we are seeing now in the market. Something that we have discussed between the carriers and the corporations in order to implement many solutions is that most of the regulators argued zero rating of information and accessibility to first responders, health services, or emergency. I believe that this was a very important tool for the benefit of users. That led to very positive, good results. Mexico this year published the guidelines of network neutrality, providing zero rating because of the way that users use this. And most of the people started using internet at home as Wi-Fi was saturated. Wi-Fi networks were overwhelmed, so we needed better connectivity, more broadband, and through Facebook and any other company and some other companies, we tried to drive a new identification of the 6 gigahertz for unlicensed use, and this would mean 1200 megahertz more for the Wi-Fi networks. This will not only allow the quality of service and better access, but also access to new technology, such as Wi-Fi 6, that will facilitate augmented reality, VR, virtual reality, and video applications that could basically keep up with this necessary speed. Argentina and Colombia are working jointly towards these endeavors. We've made efforts and progress with legislation along these lines. Mexico consulted or propose many projects. Argentina follows suit. So we're constantly driving for creating this sort of incentives so jointly we could pursue the connectivity improvement in our region. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. There's a lot of data that are going to be useful for the students that are attending this conference. It is essential that we have 4 visions that converge towards the same end, and that is attaining stability, connectivity, and effective use of the internet. Right now, over to you, Olga, to see if we can take some of the questions from the students. Thank you. Very interesting speeches provided and presentations provided by these 4 panelists. Let me remind you that in 2012, when I was in Bogota, Iván Sánchez was the commissioner of the CRC at that time, and we had Minister Diego Molanos at that time, but he reminded me that he attended the School of Internet Governance of 2011. So he's been here for quite a while. So let me acknowledge his support, especially when we organized the school in 2012 in Bogota. He showed us around when we visited the city. So thank you for your help and for your support. Okay, we're growing with the South School because of people like you and for your help and for the assistance you've been providing. The project Internet for All in Peru was presented by your CEO, Ana Valero, in Mexico. She works in Madrid, in Telefónica, and it was a very interesting project that was presented here during Monday. Many people ask, how could this be replicated in other parts of the region, in other countries? So that this is the intent, to replicate this kind of initiatives or experiences, because it covered or bridged the gap basically in rainforests. And it was a public and private partnership. And this multi-stakeholder cooperation and multidisciplinary activities is what basically join forces and what drives the training and the learning, the lessons learned during the pandemic. Let me see if there are questions from the students here. Yeah, there's a question for Gustavo. Claudia says that if with this essential service declaration and competition of the internet is not a lack of incentive to maintain a quality of service in corporations. And there's another question for Lester. Because of the tides and the cable, the submarine cable designed by Microsoft and Facebook, that I believe that it was finally concluded in 2017. And those are the questions that we have from the students. I can continue, don't worry. Let me take the question that I was asked. No, these are 2 different things. We have declared these essential services in competition. These are fixed or set by corporations. They have to justify basically the increase in prices, and that's why it was declared as a utility, not as a market good. And they can compete among each other with a price. We don't have a fixed price or a set price. Basically, there's free competition in the market. They compete for market segments, offering price reductions or price breaks or discounts or promotions in their product offering. So if there's an increase that is exponential, they gotta justify why they're making that increase. Okay? Yeah, we can regulate the wholesale interconnection price to have fair play for companies. However, in this case, we chose to intervene, but they had to justify the price increase in order to make this access universal. That was the prime objective. Of course, we continued the dialogue and the discussion with corporations, but it shouldn't be open to the market because it may disrupt basically the service and leave people behind and out of the connectivity sector. And also the question about the cable, the submarine cable. If you're referring to the cable that connects Africa and Europe, I don't have any details because it's not my region. I wouldn't know about this, but what I can tell you, we have a long-term process between Argentina and Brazil. We didn't have any problems with the tides with the submarine cable, but I don't know about the other countries. In the case of Malbec, we're about to finalize the last details, but it's fully installed, fully deployed, and is ready to be operational. Malbec is a good name. It's like the wine from Argentina. So it's named after a wine. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's been a great panel. Thank you very, very much. Juliana, thank you very, very much for moderating the panel. Iván, Gustavo, the same to you. Lester. I thank you so much for being here. And right now we are going to continue and resume later on. Greetings from Buenos Aires, and hopefully I look forward to seeing you in person. Greetings from Adrian. He's here in the backstage with the audio visual team. Thank you very much. My greetings to all of you. Thank you very much. Okay. Thanks a lot, Olga. Thanks. Thanks, Olga. Goodbye.
Gracias.